Okay, folks, could I just first and foremost welcome you here tonight. Just to make you aware, you may have heard that voice in the background, that digital voice telling you that the recording is a process. This is the last of 6 meetings across the 6 counties, and for that reason, tonight's meeting is also what's known in UFU circles as a hybrid meeting, and I know we've about 50 plus people registered online. They won't have, and I'm hoping they're hearing me at this stage. And the reason for that is that I want to inform them that if they have questions later on, they need to put that into the Q&A function on their devices, on their laptops or phones or whatever that might be. Obviously, those of you in the room will be able to ask questions from the floor. And in some respects, when I'm giving you a bit of an introduction, I'll be handing over to Norman from the Department of Agriculture to take us through this, and then we get to a Q&A. So Norman's piece is sort of close to an hour, and that'll hopefully give us a decent time for questions from the floor. But I suppose I just want to lay a wee bit of a foundation of where we've come from, because obviously many of you will be well enough aware that under the Common Agricultural Policy, our money came from Brussels. That's no longer the case since Brexit happened. So that money was guaranteed by the UK government for the length of this Parliament. The length of this Parliament in Westminster is 2024. Beyond that, my predecessor, Victor Chestnut, would have been across there, in the years where George Eustace was DAERA Minister, and he made it absolutely clear, if you think that, the money is just going to keep coming on the basis of a per hectare payment, well then you're sadly amiss, because fundamentally what's happened in England in the first instance is that all of that money over a 7-year period is moving from what you and I would know as farmers, supporting the farming industry, supporting the production of the food that you produce on your farms. In England, all of that is moving over a 7-year period to environmental measures. In Scotland, and they're a bit behind us in the development of their agricultural future policy, but they're looking at 50% of the money coming on a payment per hectare, and 50% then being moved for other measures, many of them obviously environmental measures as well. And even last week, I was down with the chairs of our committee structure. We visited the Irish Farmers Journal, Tullamore Farm, that perhaps some of you who read the journal might be familiar with. And the farmer who owns that farm, they have leased for a 15-year lease, but the farmer who owned it described how he was an intensive beef finisher on very high payments per hectare back in the day when it was on a historic basis. And how that had changed, and that, well, I suppose 2 things. Number one, over the incoming CAP, which is only just, I suppose, embarking on, despite the fact that we're already talking about the next change to the Common Agricultural Policy, 25% of their monies is going to be going towards environmental measures, and his payments over the next 5 years we're going to reduce, over 5 years, we're going to reduce to €75,000. So he was looking at a very, very significant cut as well. So what we need to, I suppose, have a bit of an understanding is what we once had under the payments coming from Europe. It doesn't exist here, nor does it exist in the rest of Europe anymore. I suppose the significant thing and probably important thing for us in Northern Ireland, and indeed Scotland and Wales, was that we were allowed the opportunity to develop and work on, what might suit or what might work within our own agricultural structures. It's fair to say, and I don't want to steal from what Norman is going to share with us shortly, but a lot of that is about providing outcomes. So I suppose the message coming from Westminster was, if this is public money, in other words, taxpayers' money, then public goods, and public goods in effect is the outcomes that these future policies are designed to deliver. And we may or may not like those outcomes, and may or may not think they're necessary or needed, but they are a reality, I suppose, of having this huge change coming, some of which is coming from the beginning of next year, which is not very far away. But I suppose ultimately the one significant thing, and I'm sure many of you will be aware of this, around the climate legislation, which we had approved in Stormont. That put fairly onerous, very onerous requirements on a reduction of emissions here in Northern Ireland. And you may or may not agree with them, but the truth of it is they're there, they're in legislation. And the bottom line on that is the Climate Change Committee, which is a group of experts across in the UK, which advise all of the regions, made it very clear that they were beyond. The first thing is they were beyond what they had recommended and their advice had been. So our politicians give us something that was even harder than, and much more difficult than what even they were recommending for Northern Ireland. But their advice and guidance was that basically between now and 2030, in order to meet those targets, we would need a 22% reduction in our dairy herd, 17% reduction in our beef herd, and an 18% reduction in our sheep, pigs and poultry. So those are, I suppose, stark reminders of the sort of legislation that exists. But fundamentally, as I say, I'm about to hand over to Norman. The discussions and conversations we have, and I can assure you, as President of the Ulster Farmers Union and my colleagues, we have argued against the need for livestock cuts. So there are other options ahead of us in the next 5 years, which will be relayed to you shortly. But we do need to have an understanding of why some of these things are coming our direction. But I'm going to hand over to Norman, and as I say, look forward to your questions later. And also just remind the people at home, if you have questions, put them into the Q&A. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, David. I suppose what I want to do tonight is really give you a high-level overview of quite a big programme. It's a lot to take in, so I couldn't possibly give you all the detail, and many details still being worked on, but it should give you a broad picture of what to expect over the next 2.5 years as we roll this out. And as each element rolls out, then they'll obviously be coming out with more information. So hopefully by the end of this evening, you'll get a broad feel for the direction of travel over the next while. So this has been really evolving since 2018. Put out a discussion document that year that really sort of set the foundations, and we worked forward from there into a framework document in 2021. Then there in 2021, early 2022, had a consultation on more detailed proposals. And then the Minister made announcements in March 2022, really setting the policy position that we've now been fleshing out since then and working towards what we'll talk about tonight. So really a lot of work has been going on to really flesh that out into the measures and schemes that we'll see later on. But I suppose the big question, and the David sort of alluded to, is why? Why are we doing this? What are we actually trying to achieve? And that's the most important thing, really, at the outset to establish. So in the centre there, you see the four big issues that we see need to be addressed within agriculture over the next 25, 30 years. So first of all, it's pursuing the goal of increased productivity, efficiency. So we're not talking about expanding production, it's about the efficiency of production. It's how well we use resources, how we can reduce costs, how can we reduce inputs that actually cause environmental damage, how can we cut carbon, how can we be more efficient within the industry. We have to do that because we need to keep up with our competitors. It's happening all over the world. We are living in a global marketplace. We're not immune from global influences, and we need to be able to keep up with what's happening in other regions. So this is really a never-ending journey. You have to keep on moving forward on productivity, on efficiency. Second one then is around environmental sustainability, and we have to accept that agriculture has a case to answer in terms of some of the issues that we see. And a lot of mist, the water quality issues, ammonia, air quality, biodiversity, soil health. These are all issues that need to be addressed, but agriculture can address them. So therefore, that's something we now need to really put a particular focus on, and will be a major plank within the overall agenda. So it's really looking at how agriculture can really start to make really good progress on these issues around the environment and become more environmentally sustainable moving forward. Thirdly, then, is resilience. Again, another really important issue. As I mentioned, industry, we live in an open trading environment, subject to influences from all over the world, be it war in Ukraine, be it weather events in the Southern Hemisphere. All of these things will impact on local agriculture. Volatility within markets, volatility within weather and weather patterns. So industry really needs to think about resilience and how to build resilience into your business so that you can withstand those shocks, to be able to bounce back and bounce forward. And the fourth one is operating within an efficient functioning supply chain, where the supply chain is all aligned around these common themes. We're starting to get really good progress and engagement on that. But good flow of information up and down the supply chain so that you're producing the right things in the right way and progressing on that. So this connection there. So that's fine. That's the vision. Those are the big things that will really guide us in terms of the schemes and the measures that will be implemented over the next 20 to 30 years. The schemes will change over time. They will evolve. They are simply a means to an end. These are the big issues. And really, for farmers, then that translates to how you manage your land, how you manage your livestock in terms of breeding, feeding, etc. The infrastructure that you'll need to invest on within your farm businesses. And probably the most important thing is the skills and knowledge that you will need, because this is an entirely new agenda, a very challenging one, and therefore new skills, new knowledge will be needed. So really, those are the four issues that you as farmers will need to be thinking about over the years ahead. So in terms of the schemes then, and we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail, but the main ones are farm sustainability payments. That's the replacement for a basic payment scheme. A big sustainability package. Farming with nature, which is the replacement for the environmental farming scheme. Farming for carbon. Carbon is going to be a big element going forward, the greenhouse gas climate change issue. There'll be an investment measure. A knowledge and innovation package really help take you through all of this, through the change ahead. Farming for the generations, really looking at how to plan that transition of farms from one generation to the next and do it well, do it early. And finally, a supply chain package. So those are the sort of the main elements or the main schemes. But there will also then be a range of cross-cutting measures. There will be three big data packages that will be available to farmers. First one is the soil nutrient health scheme. Probably aware of that already. It's already rolling out across 2 regions. We're into the second region this year. It'll cover all of Northern Ireland and cover all fields in Northern Ireland. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Second one is our ruminant genetics program. So we're really looking at providing you with information on the genetic merit of the animals on your farm. Again, really big and important data program there. And thirdly will be carbon benchmarking, really giving you the information around your own carbon footprint within your farm business. So really, really important data packages that will provide a wealth of information for you going forward. And then along the bottom there we have controls and assurance, talking a little bit about that. There's a livestock dietary emissions package. So what we want to do, working with researchers and feed firms and processors, is to actually look, can we change livestock diets, manipulate the livestock diets to reduce methane emissions, to reduce phosphorus emissions, to reduce ammonia emissions by reducing protein. That's something that we'll be launching within the next few weeks. So that's another package that will come out to start to look at how we actually start to make real progress by dietary manipulation. Monitoring and evaluation will be very important in this program. Probably something I haven't really done enough about. We need to measure, are we making progress towards those big goals we talked about at the start. So we'll set targets, we'll measure how we're progressing each year. If we're not making the progress that we need to be making, then we'll go back and change the measures, change the schemes. So it'll be a live process of policy evolution over the next 20 odd years. And finally, we've got another package looking at horticulture. That's the one sector we think there's real scope for expansion. It's got a huge potential. So we want to look, can we actually unlock some of that potential? We'll say a few words about that later on. So, as Dave mentioned, climate change is a big component of this, and much of what is in this package will actually help us deliver on our carbon reduction, greenhouse gas reduction obligations. And again, we'll cover a little bit of that. It's a statutory obligation. It's laid down in law. So we need to take this and work with it and actually make the changes that are required. So we'll jump in then to the first one, first scheme, farm sustainability payments. So this probably will be quite familiar. So it's quite similar to the basic payment scheme, simple area-based payment. It's there to provide a basic safety net. So that's the purpose. So it's not there to underpin income. It's there to basically provide better resilience into farm businesses, safety net. So it will be area-based. It will be based on entitlements. All land-based agriculture, horticulture will be eligible to apply to meet conditions. In terms of how we create the scheme, so the basic payment scheme entitlements will be carried forward into this new regime. So we'll not be rebasing entitlements like we did back in 2015. So the number of entitlements that you own will roll forward into the new farm sustainability payments, but they will have a different value. We'll talk about that later on. Current arrangements will continue in terms of how you actually can trade and transfer these entitlements. So they can be leased, they can be transferred, they can be sold, they can be bought. The important thing, we've now got a single pot of money out of which all of our support is paid. So at the minute, it is predominantly paid out to the basic payment scheme. Over time, as these new elements that we'll talk about later on come on stream, money will be taken from that pot and start to be fed into these other measures. So over time, the value of entitlements, the amount of money that will be devoted to this safety net will reduce. And we're expecting that to start happening in 2024, whenever the planned beef carbon reduction scheme comes on board. So that's one of the big ones that will start next year. So farm sustainability payment itself will get in from so it will start from be phased in from 2025. So 2024, the basic payment scheme, as you know it, will continue, but the value of the 2024 payments will reduce as we start to introduce other elements. So to be eligible to receive entitlements, actually to be awarded entitlements under the new farm sustainability payments, you will have to either have farmed livestock in 2020 or 2021. So you'll need to have livestock registered to your farm business. Or if you're not a livestock business, you must have been growing at least 3 hectares of an arable or horticultural crop, as recorded on your single application form. So only if you meet those conditions will you actually be awarded entitlements. Now, we recognize there might be a few cases where we don't hold that record. For the most part, we don't hold that record. We don't know. There may be instances where we don't have that information, but there will be a means by which farmers who aren't recorded on our system can actually say, yes, I was actively farming in that period. There will be capping of payments, so that will be introduced over 2 years, and that'll be set. It'll start to kick in at £60,000 per holding, and there will be progressive capping above that amount. So between 60 and 80,000, there'll be a certain level of reduction between 80 and 100, 100 and 150, and so on. So it's that progressive reduction, which is going to the higher levels of payment. That's in keeping with the design, which is a safety net. And therefore, any safety net, there has to be really does need to be a limit on the overall amount of money going in for a safety net. Finally, the claim size, minimum claim size on the basic payment scheme is 3 hectares. It will be raised to 5 hectares under this scheme. And will come with conditions. So if you like, this is the contract. In return for that basic safety net, we'll want you to do some things in return. So first of all, compliance with the new set of farm sustainability standards. That's a replacement for cross compliance. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We want you to participate in the soil and nutrient health scheme. We want you, in due course, we'll come a bit later in the programme, to use that information to actually construct a nutrient plan for your farm. We want you to take part in the genomics programme, rumen genetics programme, and provide genetic profiles for the animals and on-farm performance data. And we'll want you to participate in the carbon benchmarking programme. And finally, sitting on alongside that, we want to develop a crisis framework. So it's really a sort of a setting out what we would expect business to do in terms of building risk management into your own business. This is a basic safety net. It won't cover all eventualities, and so therefore we want farm businesses to actually think about risk, and to think about how they build in resilience into their businesses to manage volatility. And it probably will be only over a certain level of severe market disruption that the department would say, well, maybe there's a case to actually try and help. We're not holding back any money. We won't be holding back any money to deal with the unexpected market disturbances. So largely it's going to be down to farm businesses to really build that into their plans going forward. Okay, second component then of the beef sustainability package. So this is about improving productivity within the beef sector, reducing greenhouse gases, which is a really key goal here on this one, and lowering environmental footprints, so lowering emissions of ammonia as well. So there's 2 components. There's a sucker cow scheme, and within that is reducing the age of first calving and reducing calving interval. And requiring participants now to take part in the rumen genetics programme. Second is the beef carbon reduction scheme. So that's reducing the age of clean cattle at slaughter, again to reduce carbon footprint to improve efficiency. So the gateway into those 2 components is you need to be claiming the farm sustainability payment. So if you claim the farm sustainability payment, that's your gateway into these 2 measures. So looking at, first of all, at the sucker cow measure, age first calving. So this will be phased in production, and we're talking about a 2025 start. So you have a little bit of time to prepare for that. So over a 4-year period, we're wanting to reduce the age of first calving from 34 months down to 29 months. So that's phased in over 4 years. So basically, we want the cow to be working hard for you. We want you to basically, rather than have heifers carrying through up to 3 years and beyond before they actually start producing any return, we want to actually drive down that age of first calving. And then it's thereafter it's the calving interval. So again, we want to drive that down for the purpose of efficiency and reducing carbon emissions. So starting off at 415 days and driving that down progressively over 4 years to 385 days. So that's paid in respect of individual animals that are meeting those targets. All of the data, the information that will be required to administer this will be available to the department from its own systems. So you won't have to provide the data. We will be able to harvest that data from NIFAS. And therefore, it will be very easily administered for us and for you. And we will plan to have effectively an online dashboard, so you can log in at any time to see how you're doing in terms of the animals that you would have. Now, the whole purpose of keeping a sucker cow is to produce a live calf. So the payment would be triggered on the production of a live calf registered on NIFAS. So that's what they're looking for. So not just paying on a sucker cow, it's on a live calf registered on the system. And there will be payment limits, so there will be a limit on the number of animals on which a payment will be made at individual farm level. And so further work is being undertaken to develop that operating system and rules and arrangements around all of that. So really success in terms of what this would drive is that really maintaining the output of sucker calves, but doing it from a smaller breeding herd. So that's what productivity actually would drive, and that would drive down the carbon footprint, but maintaining output and delivering a better bottom line. So it's really about the feeding, the breeding, the management of the sucker cow, and what you need to do to hit these targets. And there will be help and advice provided around all of that. Okay, second component on the beef sustainability package then is beef carbon reduction measure. This is one, so we're still subject to final approval on this one, but we're planning this will come in from January 2024. So this will be limited to clean beef cattle that are born and reared in Northern Ireland and registered on NIFAS. So import store cattle will not be eligible for this payment. So born and reared in Northern Ireland and paid on slaughter. So the phased implementation to reduce that age at slaughter for clean cattle. So in the first year starts a 30-month limit, and that will progressively reduce over 4 years down to a 26-month limit. So need to be slaughtered under 26 months of age. The other thing I'd mention as well is that we will also pay this on animals that are exported for direct slaughter. So we know that some cattle are exported down south for direct slaughter. As long as the information comes back to us that yes, the animals have been slaughtered, then the payment would be made in respect of that animal. Again, there's a maximum number of eligible animals, and we have to do that for WTO Blue Box requirements. So 352,000 animals is the maximum number that we would pay on in any given year under this scheme. If the number exceeded that, then we would scale back the payment rates to keep within that overall limit. And it's unlikely within the first few years at least that we would hit that, but we have to have that limit in place. No minimum age at slaughter, but we will keep a close eye on this, and if there are issues start to emerge around bobby calves starting to appear, then we would really move quickly to rectify that. And there's no differentiation between steers, young bulls, and heifers in terms of the age. So it's simple, same age applies to all classes of clean cattle that are slaughtered. Once calf heifers would not be eligible for this payment, but chances are the once calf heifer will actually get the sucker payment if she meets the age of first calving. So we don't want to double subsidize that particular class of animal. In terms of indicative rates of payment, we pay the same, so we don't disturb the market. So we're talking about a payment of £20 a head in January, 40 in February, 60 in March, and then from April on, £75 a head. So that phased introduction will prevent disturbance in the market. The other thing we're very conscious of is we don't actually want this to change the way in which people market their animals. So we're not insisting, for example, that you must present the animal to an abattoir to qualify for the payment. And we recognise that a lot of animals are presented through the live ring and go on for slaughter. They may end up getting slaughtered, up to a week later or even longer than that. So what we're saying to allow that to happen, we're saying in the last 100 days of the animal's life before it was slaughtered, who had that animal for a minimum of 60 days? And that's the person who will get the payment. So that allows a bit of flexibility in terms of animals moving from the farm to the abattoir, recognizing that there are some very short keep systems out there, but it will go to the person who had the animal for a minimum of 60 days in the last 100 days of its life. Okay, moving on then to the Farming with Nature package. This is replacement for EFS, going to be an important component of the overall program. And some of the things we want to develop here, we want this to be large scale and strategic. So we want to bring in significant volumes of land into this measure. Unlike the beef measures, you don't have to be in receipt of the farm sustainability payment to actually be eligible for the Farming with Nature package. Farming with Nature will be available to farmers and land managers, so a slightly broader population of individuals who could qualify for that. Minimum land area, as with the current EFS, will remain at the 3 hectares, and we really want to make us an attractive option for farmers. Effectively, it will become another economic enterprise in your farm business on which you can earn a margin. So therefore, it will be attractive, and you can build it into your business plan and business model on that basis. But Minister did say that he did want to see an individual cap on the amount of money that can be received. That's not yet been set, and something we still need to work through in terms of what would the appropriate cap be at individual claimant level. We really want this to be more outcome based. So what we mean by that is, rather than being very prescriptive, saying you can do this and you can't do that, and you have to have a certain stocking density and all the rules that you have at EFS, it's more about describing the outcomes we want to achieve. And then it's over to you in terms of your knowledge. Nobody knows your land better than you in terms of delivering those outcomes. And like any farm enterprise, the better you do your job, the more money there is in it for you. So it's really about describing what outcomes we want to achieve, then over to you, and we'll provide you with the training and the knowledge and the skills to actually get you there. So we want to move towards that model of agri-environment. We also recognise that the current approach, which was mandated by Europe, of 5-year agreements, is simply too short for agri-environment. These things need longer time to actually show benefit, and therefore we're looking at contracts potentially up to 20 years with 5-year review clauses. So dip in every 5 years, how are you getting on? Do you want to continue on to the next 5 years? What are you going to do over the next 5 years? So take a much longer time perspective on these measures. Our initial focus would be on habitats. So we really want to restore, create new habitat on farm, which is really important to start to address the whole issue around species diversity and species loss. We'll not ignore water quality, but we really want to sort of make real progress on habitats. Also want to encourage collaboration between farmers. So we can get groups of farmers working together. It delivers better outcomes. So can we actually then start to reward and incentivize collaborative working amongst groups of farmers? And monitoring and evaluation is going to be very important. We haven't really done it well on agri-environment to date. We need to be able to show impact. We need to be able to show that we're actually making progress. And so that is going to be an absolutely key part of this program, that we're actually improving our habitat, that we're reversing some of the trends that have been evidenced over the last number of years. So in terms of what the scheme will look like, so you have a Farming with Nature scheme, and that will give you, or agreement rather, and that will give you access then to a number of components that you can build up within that single agreement. So it'll be modular in delivery. Start with key elements and add on further modules as policy evolves and the program evolves. There are components in here that will be more suited for intensive farming areas based on a habitat assessment on your farm and how you can actually start to build greater habitat within your farm and be rewarded for doing that. There'll be elements that will be more suited to priority habitats, to high nature value areas, specific environmental objectives. And the payment framework will be made up of a number of components reflecting the habitats that you have, the actions that you're undertaking to actually try and improve those, and the results that you're achieving. So it's a more flexible approach. So in terms of the schematic, in terms of what that would look like, the farming with nature package on the left-hand side, farm nature, you sort of regard that as a sort of follow-on for wider EFS. This is more, the package is going to be suited to lowland, more intensive areas. So that would be based on a farm biodiversity score. We'll be using technology to actually help drive a biodiversity score for your farm. The higher your score, the higher your payment. And therefore, the incentive is for you to start to increase biodiversity and increase your habitat score and be rewarded for that. We also want to undertake a farmyard water risk assessment within that program to actually start to deal with some of the water quality issues. Middle component then is Farm Nature Plus, and that, so in some ways, would be a follow-on to EFS Higher. Here, this is more into the sort of higher habitats, higher value nature areas. So we're looking for an approved ecologist to actually produce a plan for your farm. Payment would be based again on the habitats that you have and the state of those habitats. We'd be looking to streamline the processes compared with what we have at the minute, because it's very cumbersome what we have at the minute. The links into conservation management plans, and again, using technology to make this much easier for you and for us to deliver. Now on the right-hand side, this is where it's more a bottom-up approach. It's a group-based approach, really on a competitive call basis, actually offering up to groups of farmers to come forward with their ideas as to how they could work together within a particular area, a particular habitat, a catchment or whatever, to actually deliver innovative solutions to environmental problems, working together, working with a third-party delivery agent. So that would be a competitive component to the program. Along the bottom end is what we're calling the actions fund. So at this point in time, within EFS, if you need to do some work, say planting a hedge or planting trees or whatever, it's all part of that annual cycle of payments. Quite often you're putting on an application in May before you've actually done the work. And the expectation and hope that you will do the work over the summer. Sometimes you're not able to do that. That causes problems for you, causes problems for us. But it means you're setting out the money for quite a period of time before you be paid, up to a year before you get paid. So we want to take us out of that annual cycle and basically say, if you want to undertake actions that will improve your biodiversity score, that will improve the habitats on your farm, then do the work, put in the claim, and we'll pay that against that verified claim outside of the annual cycle. So the annual cycle will be about the state of your habitat and where you're scoring. The actions fund is really do the work and out verified, and then we pay that. So it's a much more flexible approach, really learning the lessons of what really works well under EFS. Okay, moving on into the whole climate change agenda, the carbon agenda. So we have obligations now built into the Climate Change Act. So by 2050, Northern Ireland as a whole must reach carbon neutrality. There was a consultation that ended in mid-October in terms of setting the budgets. You have to set 5-yearly budgets towards that goal. So we need to set a budget for the period of 2023-27, and then 2 others, 2028 to 2032, 2033 to 2037. So you have these 5-year chunks, 5-year budgets, and against each of those 5-year budgets, then you have to have an action plan. So you're going to have to do the first action plan, and that's currently being worked out. So that action plan will cover all sectors across the Northern Ireland economy, and agriculture is obviously within scope of that. And the Climate Change Committee has given certain advice and thoughts in terms of how agriculture can meet its obligations within that overall plan. So in terms of the sectors that are relevant to farmers, first of all, agriculture is as defined. So that is really livestock, agricultural soils, and stationary combustion off-road machinery. So that's the definition within the inventory. So the emissions from agriculture is really driven by the number of livestock you have on farms, the quantity of fertilizer applied to land, and the intensity of your farming activity. That's what drives carbon emissions from agriculture. The other one then is land use change in forestry. So that can be both a source and a sink. For example, forestry soaks up carbon, degraded peat or drained peat releases carbon. So that land use change category is both an emitter and a sequester of carbon. And so we have to look then, how can we actually drive more of the sequestration and drive down the emissions within that. So in terms of where we sit at this point in time, on the left-hand side, you'll see the composition of greenhouse gas emissions in Northern Ireland. Agriculture is the biggest, at 28% of Northern Ireland's total emissions. So we've got a lot of work to do in all this. Land use change, and that's a net figure between the level of emissions and sequestration, comes for another 10%. So that's a lot of emissions that fall to agriculture. Now, we don't get to zero, it's net zero for Northern Ireland as a whole, but we do need to substantially reduce our carbon footprint. Unfortunately, in terms of the trajectory since 1990, because it's all measured against 1990 baseline in terms of the movement, agriculture's emissions have actually increased over that period. So not only do we have to drive it down, we have to actually turn a curve as well. So it's going to be a big challenge moving forward. So therefore, within this program, we're looking to really assist and incentivize farmers to adopt carbon reduction. And we'll have elements of carbon reduction built into as many policy interventions as possible. And over time, we'll try and drive that down. But the really important thing is science is changing and moving all the time. This is relatively new science, and therefore we need to invest in the science to understand better our carbon footprint, but also invest in the new technologies that are coming forward to drive that down. And if you could do that without reducing the size of the industry, that would be success. So continued investment in science is going to be crucial as we move forward. Well, for the first 5-year carbon period, so this is the mix of measures that we have. So we've already talked about reduction in the number of older beef cattle by reducing age of calving, reducing replacement rates, age of slaughter. And we're also trying to do something similar for the dairy side, but using an advisory message to do that. And the dairy sector is already making significant progress by reducing replacement rates and age of first calving. We're looking at feed additives and feed formulation. Mentioned that at the start. Again, using new technologies coming forward to actually reduce methane emissions that come from ruminant livestock, cattle in particular. Because methane is the biggest greenhouse gas coming from agriculture. Therefore, we need to use technology to try and drive that down. The second biggest component of the greenhouse gas footprint from agriculture is fertilizers. So therefore, can we start to look more back towards legumes and herbs, reducing our fertilizer input to drive down nitrous oxide emissions that come from fertilizer irrigation in land. Breeding and genomics, great potential there to drive down carbon footprint. You can breed animals for low methane emissions, but you're also breeding for efficiency as well, which will also reduce your carbon emissions. Moving towards protected urea, again to reduce the carbon footprint from fertilizers, biomethane from waste. And on the land use side, more forestation, more agroforestry, mixing agriculture with tree planting, peatland restoration. Soil carbon, can we actually start to manage soils to lock up more carbon? Do that reliably and can measure the benefits. So we're really interested in looking at that. And things like more hedgerows, bigger hedgerows, and can we store more carbon in that? Bioenergy crops is the other one we need to look at. So these are the things that will be in the mix for the first 5-year carbon reduction period and built into this program. And for the most part, these are good things to do anyway. For the most part, these will actually not only reduce carbon, that will actually add to your bottom line. So it's important that we do that. And if we can do that and keep investing in that technology, then that minimizes the likelihood of us actually having to reduce livestock numbers, reduce the size of the industry. So that's the thing that, it's our last option, not our first. So can we continue making progress in these other areas? To help on all of that, so this is the first big data program. So this is carbon benchmarking, providing you with information on the carbon footprint for your individual farm. So there's an industry-led group really leading on that, and we're working very closely with the group. So we want to benchmark all farms across Northern Ireland, do that over a 4-year period, and then repeat that every 3 years. So you have information on where you're starting from, but also the progress that you'll be making over time to reduce your carbon footprint, and identifying the areas within your individual farm where you can make progress to reduce your carbon. So really important information. That'll be accompanied by knowledge transfer measures, by skills that you will need to do that. It provides that baseline from which you measure progress. Also a hugely valuable research tool as well. So you actually look at where are the opportunities to drive down carbon within agriculture. Participation, as mentioned earlier, will be really a requirement of the farm sustainability payments. The important thing to remember when you're talking about carbon and carbon budgets is that if any farmer does less than his share, then all other farmers will have to do more, because there's a single budget, and we need to hit that budget. So to the extent to which any farmer doesn't engage, every other farmer is going to have to work that little bit harder. So we all need to actually work at this one to try and make progress. Ruminant Genetics Program, another hugely exciting opportunity here. Again, industry-led. So we have had the creation of sustainable ruminant genetics earlier on in the summer. So Victor Chestnut is chair, and recently had the appointment of John Muir as chief executive. So this is going to be wrapping up over the next number of months. It's really going to drive productivity, resilience, improving animal health, welfare, and environmental gains through breeding of ruminant livestock. So again, we'll want farmers to provide some data into this program. A lot of the data that will be needed for this will be harvested from existing sources of information, be that NIFAS, be that movement through marts, be that animals going to abattoirs, be that milk deliveries to dairy processors. A lot of that data will be harvested and used to create the data, the information that will be flowing back to you onto your business, individual businesses. And there will be significant knowledge transfer programs around all of that. The program, importantly, will include genetic profiling of all cattle in Northern Ireland. So you will get genetic information back on your individual animals. That'll be a hugely valuable resource. So what you will get from this data platform is, in terms of your enterprise, your ruminant enterprise, you'll have benchmark information in terms of the physical performance of your enterprise compared with your peers. So it starts to highlight where you can start to make improvements within the efficiency of your business. But as I said, you'll also get those genetic evaluations for all the animals in your herd. And that will be hugely valuable. So in terms of that genetic evaluation, it will be driven by taking DNA from ear tissue samples. It will allow the establishment of accurate parentage information, so the dam and the sire. If you know the DNA component, the makeup of the animal, you know the dam and the sire immediately. It'll be genomic evaluation for all dairy and beef animals, so you'll be able to then have that fed back in very quickly. It gives you an early indication of superior genetics within your herd, the animals from which you should be breeding. It'll allow you to breed on things that you can't tell by simply looking at an animal. So provide you with the numbers, the data around things like maternal traits, about methane emissions, about resistance to disease, all of that information can be provided from that genomic information that will be provided to you. So in terms of doing that, we will fund the genetic evaluation of the current breeding herd and the first calf drop. And then thereafter, we would expect that to be funded by individual farmers. The cost of this technology is dropping all the time. It's currently about £13 a head, but it's probably the best £13 you'll ever spend in terms of the quality of information and the value of information back to you. And again, that will be a condition of the farm sustainability payment. Third big data program is underway. It's in its second year now, providing the soil nutrient health scheme. So provides baseline data back to you on your individual fields covering pH, major nutrients, and carbon both above ground in terms of trees and hedges, and below ground in terms of what's stored in your soils. So again, provides really valuable information for you in terms of managing nutrients on your farm and driving productivity, but also a really good platform to understand where water quality risks may arise from, and therefore feeding that and integrating that into farming with nature in terms of trying to address some of those issues. And again, we'll want you to take part in that as a condition of farm sustainability payments. So this has been rolled out across Northern Ireland. So we started off providing the southeast last year, 95% uptake of fields in that area. Moved into the southwest, it's 92%. And then we move into the northwest and finally northeast. So we're 4 years covering all of Northern Ireland with that information. And what you get back for your individual farm, you'll get obviously pH of your soil within your fields, phosphorus, potash, sulfur, magnesium, calcium, and soil organic matter. So you get a lot of information back from that. Importantly as well, you get information on where your runoff risks are within your farm. So using LiDAR, slope, and nutrient loading, actually working out where are the risk areas within your business in terms of nutrient runoff into waterways. So it starts to give you information in terms of how you manage that on your farm, but also if we're talking about establishing riparian strips or planting buffer strips, it actually gives really good information as to where they should be established. So again, it could be integrated with the farm program that actually show where you start to establish these and start to address water quality using actual hard data and starting to build progress. And once you get the information in, you can then partake in the training program. It's an online program, and then progress onto a nutrient management plan for your individual practices. Again, we want you to do that. It's important that you do, and that's what we're wanting to see in terms of meeting the conditions of the scheme. Moving on into investment. So really this would be a successor to the Farm Business Investment Scheme. There's currently a survey out there. If you haven't done so, do please feed your views back on that. It's on in a minute. We really want to use investment to drive and support the adoption of innovation and new technology on farm businesses, better nutrient management, reduction of greenhouse gases, reduction in ammonia emissions, nitrates, improved water quality, all of those environmental issues as well. So, but in doing so, we don't want to encourage you into undertaking investments that are not actually going to be beneficial, because you can very easily end up spending too much of your hard-earned money on capital items that don't make a return for you. So there always has to be a balance in that. We're targeting this towards the latter part of 2024 in terms of launch. We will use the evaluation and review information from the Farm Business Investment Scheme in terms of learning the lessons, what worked well within Farm Business Investment, what is maybe worked not so well, and how can we improve on that, and really use that information to develop what the new investment scheme would look like and how it could be improved. Farming for generations, this is the new component. This is really about transferring farm business from one generation to the next within the family farm. I want to see it being planned in advance, done well, done early, and addressing everyone's concern around the kitchen table. Really raising awareness of the need to actually plan for the transfer of farm businesses, to support business owners through that whole process of succession and business planning, looking to the development needs of the successor to make sure that they have all the tools in the toolbox that they need to make a real success when they take over the farm business. But also, so really supporting around knowledge and skills and opportunities, but also looking then for the retiring farmer. I mean, he has to have something to do with himself, and therefore what supports can be built in there for the person who's stepping back, but still has something to contribute. So we're looking to develop a pilot and launch that early part of next year. This will be external delivery on this one. So starting off with a workshop for the farm family, really sitting down around the farm table, working with a mentor, looking at starting the whole process of succession planning, all that's associated with that. Looking then around capacity training for the person who's going to take over the farm, in terms of training opportunities, opportunities for study abroad, if necessary, working abroad. Looking at to incorporate land mobility within this program, but as I mentioned at the end, support then for the person who's stepping back. For example, could they actually become mentors within this program, or even an evolution of something like program rural support operate, Tyrone. We actually have effectively that social club, if you like, for retired farmers, because they have to have an interest, they have to get out, and they have to be valued as well. So it's really taking a 360-degree look within the farm and working with farm families to ease that transition from one generation to the next. Knowledge and innovation, this would be a really big program and really important program because there's a lot of change coming down the track and a lot of new knowledge will have to be acquired. It'll be very much aligned with the policy position, evidence-based, looking at the evaluation of what's worked well in the current program. Really focused on delivering against those 4 outcomes talked about at the start. So resilience, productivity, environmental sustainability, functioning supply chain, those are the key things. Targeting, looking for continuous professional development, so continuing to invest in your skills, but also those with whom you work. So how can we work with other people who come up your farm there, be that vets, feed reps, whatever, so that they all have a clear understanding of this program and can help you as farm businesses progress in the whole program. Looking to access global innovations, looking to encourage cooperation and partnership where appropriate. Peer-to-peer learning really works. Business discussion group model, we now actually have the research evidence to show the real impact that is having on farmers' bottom lines. In the case of the dairy sector, I think it averages £200 a cow. Difference between those who are in the program and those who are sitting outside the program. So therefore, it really works. And we want to evolve that and move forward with that with peer learning, farmer to farmer learning. And utilizing technology and delivery. So it's not all about face-to-face, it's not all about the big events. Can we use the YouTube videos, all those social media stuff, all those different ways that you can engage with learning. So the model that we would apply, and this model would apply to any issue, be it an environmental issue, be it a productivity issue, animal health issue, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It can all operate off the same model. So at the bottom, you have your basic knowledge innovation hub. So that's your guidance books, your technical articles, your videos, recorded webinars, the online stuff that you can access whenever you want. Then you move into the larger scale awareness training, the large scale face-to-face events, the on-farm events. You move further up then, it's into the peer-to-peer groups. And that will be more flexible. Look to make them more flexible than the current business discussion groups. So you might create a group to address an issue within a particular area. It could be a catchment issue, it could be an animal health issue, whatever. work through that group, and then we stand it down again and move it up to employers. So a much more flexible approach, really driven by the needs of farmers within a particular area. You then have innovation visits, so the opportunity to actually go out and see elsewhere, be it in GB, be it down south, be it in Europe, wherever. Innovation and new ways of thinking, new ways of working, sending farmers out to actually bring that back and share that knowledge and information with other farmers. Again, we've done some of that up to this point. It works really well, and we want to really evolve that. And then at the top of the pyramid, the innovation partnerships. This is where farmers, groups of farmers will be working with researchers on a particular difficult problem. So that's right at the top of the innovation tree. And in terms of where you dip in to that pyramid, it doesn't really matter. Dip in where it suits you. So we're not saying you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. It's really what works for you, what works for your business. And it's all about acquiring the knowledge that you need to develop your business. Horticulture, so it's one sector where we see real scope for development and growth. It's production horticulture we're looking at. It's really about, big issue in there is really about supply chain and fragmentation. Can we start actually to address that through collaborative working, knowledge transfer, learning from others, the peer-to-peer stuff, and the adoption of new technology. So the broad shape of that program is still under development, but you would have sector growth groups. That would be about really established businesses starting to work collaboratively with each other. A group facilitated and measured, looking at agronomy and business advice. Innovation would be a real focus on that. We're really starting to see if we can drive forward, from established businesses working together, the development of their outputs and their profitability. A growers academy, but more focused on new entrants or people taking over existing businesses. Again, probably supported by mentoring, tailored technical input to those businesses, again, with a focus on innovation. And then on the innovation one, on the left-hand side, that really would be for those who want to explore new technologies. So what sort of support would we need? To be capital support. So again, we're driving productivity, we're driving resilience, driving sustainability within established businesses through the adoption of innovation and new technology. So that's currently under development, but we hope to get pilots out on some of that again towards the early part of next year. Controls assurance then. We would have a new set of farm sustainability standards to replace cross compliance. Cross compliance is really across Europe. There are some elements of that that are simply not relevant to us. This is really about making standards that are relevant to Northern Ireland. So the 6 components around protection of water, habitat, landscape, livestock, food and feed, biosecurity, welfare and protection of farm animals and livestock ID. We're going to reform the penalty system to make sure that it is fit for purpose and is proportionate, because what we have had in the past hasn't always been proportionate. And sometimes there have been very heavy reductions made for relatively minor infringements. So we want to have something that's much more fit for purpose and proportionate going forward. We'll change the rules around eligibility, what constitutes eligible land. So we'll not be interested in running around measuring the width of hedges, the density of scrub, the density of brush. That will all go. So eligible land effectively will be as it's mapped in LIPIS. It will exclude hard features, be it laneways, buildings, that sort of stuff. But we'll not be running around looking for these soft features and trying to map them out year after year. So a much simpler approach for you and a simpler approach for us. And we'll use maximum use of new technologies in terms of the controls and assurance, so remote sensing and other new technologies that are coming forward to make this much easier to implement. Finally, then, just in terms of a broad timeline for the rollout of this, so it's really over the next 2.5 years, this will roll out. So soil nutrient health scheme is already into year 2. Ruminant genetics program is now starting to build and really will come on fully on stream, we hope, from April. So it'll be fully ready to roll at that point. The dietary emissions challenge fund, so I'd say within a matter of weeks that'll be out there, looking at how can we start now looking at ways of reducing emissions through changing the diet of ruminants and other livestock. Carbon benchmarking probably be by the start of next year. The progress there. Farming for generations, pilot early part of next year. Knowledge and innovation and new knowledge programs really moving out for again from next year. Farming with nature pilots on that one really into the early part of next year, and the full scheme from 2026. Beef carbon reduction, so we're working towards January launch of that one, subject to our approvals. Sucker cow scheme from 2025. Horticulture pilots really starting again next year, building towards the full scheme. Capital investment, we mentioned latter part of 2024, help it come forward. And farm sustainability, so basic payment scheme as is for 2024, but with a reduction in value as we start to move money across into other areas. And then a phased introduction of the farm sustainability payment itself in 2025 and fully on board 2026. And supply chain measures 2026 on. So that's over the next 2 years in terms of how this will be rolled out. So what I've given you tonight has been no more than an overview of the overall position. We already finished that. As each of those elements come on board, there'll be a lot more information will be put out there. I know there's a lot in this, but there'll be a lot of support as we roll out the program. And so let's come back to the fundamentals. What's this all about? Say the schemes are just a means to an end. So this is really about over the next 20, 30 years, how you will manage your land, your livestock, what you will invest in on your farms, and the knowledge and the skills that you'll need to do that. And those are the fundamentals for your farm businesses. Okay, thanks so much.
Okay, folks, there is a question online already, and I'll maybe reflect it across to Norman. We do have a roving mic for those who want to, and Catherine over on the far side will be bringing that round. But I'll just bring this question to you, Norman, and I'm hoping you can hear me okay. I don't have an extra microphone, but rather than us doing yo-yo up and down here, I'll leave Norman because he's the one who's going to answer the tough questions. But and the first one's not that straightforward, but it's a challenge, I suppose. That are we seriously only spending 10 seconds talking about horticulture after saying it's an area we see potential growth in? So I suppose fundamentally, I mean, recognizing that there's a lot of work to be done there yet.
There's a lot of work to be done, and we want to build that up. Let's say early stages to build on our developments, but yeah, we really want to drive this. We see this sector that probably has tailwinds. Rather than maybe the livestock sector's tailwinds. So we have the whole diet and health agenda, just like some of the emissions issues you would have from the other sectors. So we think there's real potential in here, and certainly it's a sector that we do want to move forward on. So a lot more details worked up on that. Yeah.
And I suppose, folks, just to re-emphasize the fact, because I tried to explain at the start, you know, this is to try and continue to secure that pot of money. Because I suppose at the end of the day, as was made very plain and clear to us, if it was to go all towards environmental measures, then I suspect we would feel equally as challenged as the folk across in England who are currently seeing at this stage already close to a 50% reduction in their single farm payments. But I suppose widely there's a lot of stuff in there and a whole huge amount of information perhaps you're hearing for the first time tonight. So I appreciate I'm hoping there's plenty of questions. And there's one here online, and then Catherine, have you got somebody shortly? No, but if there's a hand up, you do that so that Kath can come to you. What will the payment be for the suckler cow payment?
Yeah, so I haven't set that one yet, but the overall budget that we could put towards a couple of payments, so that's the carbon reduction, suckler cow and protein crop scheme, which takes a small amount of money, is 50 million. So that's the total amount that we can put there. So that really comes out of the Northern Protocol negotiations. So we're limited to 50 million out of the 300 odd million that we currently have. So in terms of peak carbon reduction, we reckon it will take in the region of sort of 24, 25 million, thereabouts, to run that scheme. So that leaves in the balance then for cow and protein crops. Now, I should also say, I know it'll come up, sheep. We have not forgotten about sheep. And that's a piece of work that we will want to undertake early next year. So if there is to be something for the sheep sector, it would have to be accommodated within that 50 million if it's a headage payment. The important thing is, a headage payment has to drive something. So within suckler cows, it's about driving productivity, driving down the carbon. Within finished animals, again, it's productivity, driving down carbon. So when it comes to sheep, it's first of all define the problem you want to solve, and then come up with the mechanism to solve it. So you would start with the idea of a headage payment and then work back. It's actually, well, what do you actually want to do within the sheep sector? What are the problems? What are the opportunities? And then you devise mechanisms that actually will take you there. So if it is a headage payment, if that is the answer, it will have to be accommodated within the 50 million that we have.
Okay, I'll just, as I've come to the question at the back, I'm just going to, I suppose I should have said, we talked about the 300 or 327 million actually, but beyond that, and it's been mentioned, the soil scheme, somewhere in the region of 40 million, the sustainable rumen genetic scheme, and the carbon survey work. I mean, and all of that is additional money that has been funded, by additional schemes brought forward by the department. It's not coming out of that 300 million, which is different to what's happening in Scotland and Wales. Catherine, you've somebody at the back. Maybe I have a pillar in the way here.
Just listen to you talking about technologies for driving down emissions. What do you think of funding new technologies or people to research more into that?
Yep. So I've actually got quite a substantial research program. Actually, next week I think it is, there'll be a significant announcement on a collaborative research program that we're engaged with SFI, Science Foundation Ireland, and UKRI. A big program around carbon, but we're also funding a range of other collaborative research as well in a few other areas, and we're funding research in NAFI. So there's a lot happening in the research area, really looking at how can we develop new technologies. And we're also very much aware of research that we're keeping a close eye on. In Tigers, for example, we're doing quite a bit of work in terms of feed additives, boluses as well, that we used to drive down methane emissions within ruminants.
For me, that sounds step forward. I suppose talking to a lot of farmers, I feel for big reductions in livestock and then hitting bottom lines.
Yeah. So I think the approach we want to take, because the science is moving on this one fast all the time. So the approach we're taking is there are certain things we can do, and they're good things to do anyway, around productivity and efficiency that will help to drive down carbon. So let's do that first. And let's not take decisions now that we might regret in 5 years' time whenever the science has moved along. And that's the approach that we want to take. So we think we can meet, more or less meet our obligations under the first carbon plan period. But we need to continue to invest in new knowledge, new innovation, if we're going to take it on to the next level.
I suppose just reflecting on the, you mentioned in your talk about the, the consultation that's out there. If you have an opinion on things that should be invested in, that might be an opportunity to. When does that close? That consultation is open for another few weeks, isn't it?
Carbon budget one.
No, the one about investment.
Oh yes, the investment one. Yes. So I think it's the end of the month.
Yeah, so I mean, those sort of things are certainly something that we're recognising, particularly for those who need to reduce emissions and so forth, that those technologies are perhaps going to be necessary going forward. Catherine, you had another one down the back?
Yeah, Norman, thanks for the presentation. It was very, very good. I'm delighted you haven't put out the sheep farmers. Can you say just something a little bit more just about the budgets in terms of, I think you talked about there were 5 measures, there were 3 data packages, but just in terms of, I'm particularly interested in sort of that basic scheme as well as the agri-environment schemes.
Yeah.
Because I think whenever people are looking at that, you mentioned 20-year timing horizons for agri-environment schemes, so it'd be interesting just to sort of get some sort of a flavour around funding that's available for those different elements.
Yeah, so I suppose we start off with the funding that we're getting from Michael. It was a 4-year package we had. So the 2024-5 is the last year, it's last year of the current Parliament. That will give us just under 330 million. So that's the replacement for all of the EU funding that would have been coming to Northern Ireland under what was CAP Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. So it would have been spent not just on agriculture, but on things like forestry, rural development, etc. So we have that to the end of the current Parliament. It's really then for an incoming government to decide then for the next, hopefully 5 years, or for life of that Parliament, what the funding package would be going forward. There's no line of sight on that one. So all we can do is argue our case, but also argue what we're trying to achieve in terms of better outcomes for the industry, better outcomes for the environment, and I really use that to argue our case. I also say, in addition to that, and as David has mentioned, I mean, capital expenditure, some of this is capital expenditure, and that's in addition. So we're actually putting in additional money from within the Northern Ireland block on capital items. So things like capital investment, some of the money that's going into some of the other programs as part of this capital. So there's a mix in there as well. But you're right, if you're looking at 20-year contracts, it takes you way beyond any normal government planning horizon. So there's a degree of, I suppose, being bold and brave in all of this. But it's not entirely new, because within forestry, you already have 15-year contracts in there as well. So it's getting that balance right. But you have to recognise that a 5-year contract for an environmental scheme is simply not long enough to show benefit, to show outcome. And the last thing you want is somebody to come in for 5 years, not continue, and then all of the benefit that's been generated in that 5 years is lost because the person leaves the team again. So we want to keep you in there and keep you delivering for the environment, and it takes time to do that.
Okay, there's a couple here, and I suppose the first one's a bit of a follow-up on the horticulture one. It'd be good if the horticulture could be happening on smaller than 3 hectares. Many talented young new entrants, not from traditional farming families, usually start with smaller plots, and unless it was potatoes, 3 hectares is a large enough risk to take with vegetables. So I'll maybe let you comment on that, and then there's a couple more.
Okay, so 3 hectares, or the 5 hectares is really on. Is purely for the farm sustainability payment. Horticulture will be a package standalone, so we'll not be saying that you have to have a minimum of 5 hectares of horticulture. You're absolutely right. It's a very different model.
These are 2 very different questions, but I'll lump them together just to. The first one is, will there be a requirement to reduce dairy cows? And then the second one, where does arable fit into future schemes and solutions?
Okay, so no, we're not saying that there should be a reduction in any livestock, but if you actually look at what we're doing here, if we can get to beef carbon reduction, finished animals off farm earlier, that means that you've got the same level of output from the industry, but you actually, at any point in time, you have fewer animals on a farm because those older animals are gone. So that actually creates opportunity then. So it actually frees up, effectively frees up resource, frees up land. So then it's the question, what can you use that for? So things like your environmental areas, things like agri-forestry, things like forestation. All of those things then start to come into play because you've created a bit of room to actually do that. But we're certainly not on the pathway of saying you have to reduce dairy cows, you have to reduce sheep or anything like that. But what I would say is if we can't continue to make progress, and if we don't get real progress and uptake on these measures from industry, then these things start to come back onto the table again. And as David said at the start, the Climate Change Committee, they have a clear view in terms of where agriculture across the UK should be going, and that's a reduction in livestock numbers. So we think we can do better than that, and that's where our focus is certainly on.
Second one was where does arable fit in? And
Where does arable fit in? So, certainly arable would fit in. So the protein crops is an element, but around the investment measure within the knowledge package, within the farm sustainability payment itself. So all of those things would be applicable to arable. I think the important thing, apart from horticulture, we've not actually come out and said we want any particular sector to advance or retreat over any other, because that fundamentally should be driven by the market. So what we're really saying is, no matter what enterprise you are in, do it well, be efficient, be productive, be resilient, look to your environmental footprint. We'll provide you with the help and support in the package to enable you to do that. But in terms of what sector you're in, what choices you make, that should largely be driven by business considerations, by the marketplace.
Definitely.
Yeah, so just back to your point around the beef. So you're aware that some of the traditional breeds of beef cattle grow less, grow over a longer period of time, but require substantially less imported artificial foods. How does that? So how do you offset carbon that's imported against? So there's potential here to decimate the traditional beef breeds because it sends the wrong message.
Okay, so this is something we looked at very, very carefully. With APHIS, we've got information on all breeds, and so we extracted all of that data at age and slaughter across all of the breeds that we have in Northern Ireland, and you couldn't actually identify that particular breed was significantly different from any other breed. If you look at the targets we set here, slaughter by 26 months is not an intensive system by any stretch of the imagination. If you look into a truly intensive system, you'd be talking about finishing 14, 15 months, even less. And bull beef, that's an intensive system. That's a grain-based system. Finishing at 26 months is not an intensive system.
Or who you've been speaking to? On whether it's intensive or not?
Yeah, our own technologists.
Okay. Okay. Can you make that analysis available just for review? Is that publicly available?
It's not publicly available, I'm sure you could get it to you if you want.
Okay. Could you do that?
Yeah. You can see me afterwards.
Yes.
I'll just I'll take a question off the screen here again. If we end up signing up for 20-year contracts, but funding's only for 5-year parliamentary terms, are we at risk of being done over again like RHI?
Yes. To mention RHI. So the risk is on us on that particular point. I mean, if we're signing a contract, it's up to us to honour that. But what I said, what we want to do is every 5 years dip back in, because some farmers may say, look, a certain comes to a point, maybe I don't want to continue on for the full 20 years, because 20 years is a big commitment for any farmer as well. So you probably want the opportunity to say, well, after 5, 10, 15 years, I have an opportunity to review, to look at the progress that I've made, to want to continue on. But to bind anyone into a 20-year contract, I think would probably drive people away because it's probably too long. So it gives that opportunity to just dip in every 5 years and renew and refresh the contract. But if you want to continue on, then we certainly want to keep you within the scheme. And that's the sort of approach we want to take on this.
Yeah, I suppose this. I know there's one down there, but this is a kind of a follow-on one, and it's to do with if you're currently in an EFS scheme, you know, will you be able to, you know, basically come out of it and then enter into the new scheme?
Yeah, that's something we're very actively looking at. You know, we want to put people across into the new measure. So obviously get it up and running, get it established, and really, because what we don't want to do is there's one more tranche of EFS higher to launch next year. So we don't actually want to have a situation where people are discouraged from going into that because they're waiting on farming with nature. So come in and then get you going, and then look to put you across and make it farming with nature. So we don't want to be you placed at a disadvantage if you're currently sitting within EFS. And indeed, for us, running parallel systems and running parallel schemes is not very efficient because you have to maintain two separate IT systems and control systems. So therefore, simplify for everyone. Once we get the new scheme fully operational, bring people across.
Catherine?
Yeah, we've got a great, what's happened now at the present time, everything's seemed to be driven by science. And you're dependent on scientists who you trust and know what they're talking about. I'm not saying scientists won't know what they're doing, but we only have to look at the COVID inquiry at the minute, and the top scientists advised on what you believe in getting the vaccine. I'm not saying that, but what we should be locking down vaccines and inquiring on now, they're all blaming each other. I didn't say that. So you have to believe what the scientists what they're talking about. But my point is, what I'm getting to, my brother is American, he's all his life's been in food technology, and he was home there recently, and he's telling me that a friend of his who was a massive dairy farmer in New Mexico, 7,000 dairy cows, 14,000 litres cow, and he got out of it and he moved up north to America, further north to America, and he's now into a lesser productive herd of cows who are 6,500, 7,000 litres. And they've done a study, and they've got two sets of figures, and one of the scientists said that the one cow given 13,000 litres was producing less emissions than the two cows, 6,500 litres each. And another scientist has got a set of figures completely contradicting. He's saying the two cows with the less inputs, between the eating less meal than the other two cows, they're mostly grass based and they're producing hardly half the emissions. So there's two eminent scientists at loggerheads.
Yeah.
So we need to be very careful with this headlong rush and didn't believe in the science.
Yeah, I think, you know, this is not something new without science. Science evolves, our understanding evolves. That's why we continue to invest in science. Otherwise, you say, well, we know the answer and walk away. That's not how science works. And it could well be you're looking at two different I suppose baselines for measuring emissions. So, for example, national inventory at a UK level, imported feeds are effectively off book because the greenhouse gas emissions effectively sit in the region, in the country where production occurs, not where consumption occurs. So, for example, in the case of Northern Ireland, we're importing a large amount of feedstuffs. The greenhouse gas footprint for the production of the feed sits wherever that feed came from. Now, when you're looking at carbon footprinting an individual farm, you're taking that back into account again. So you have different accounting systems in terms of how you actually operate. So it could well be that they're using two different accounting systems for the assessment in two different bases.
You stated there earlier on about the dairy cow there, reducing the age of average dairy cow.
Yeah.
So from what, 7 years old, 7 or 8, down to what, I mean, that's, you know, that to bring those cows that are only going to last 2 or 3 years, given 13,000, 14,000 litres, they're going to be getting stuff immediately. So why bring down the age? Why not have a lesser productive cow that lasts longer?
Yeah, so I think it takes you into, you know, what's the measure of a productive cow? It's probably around lifetime production rather than lactation production. So getting, you know, 2 lactations is probably not great because you've got a huge overhead in terms of your replacements. So it's about lifetime production. So I think these are all things that, you know, will evolve over time. But if you don't bet on science, what do you bet on? You know, and that's why you have to keep on investing. Even though science around methane is changing as well, our understanding of methane and how persists in the atmosphere. All that is moving, and therefore that's why we need to keep up with the science and so on.
The beef's the eligibility starting in January. Can you just clarify the eligibility on that? There seemed to be a bit of confusion about one where nobody would have got the payment if it was killed, or like if it was killed after 2 weeks or something, as opposed to the
So we look in the last 100 days of the animal's life, and who had the animal for a minimum of 60 days. So that's the key here. So if you have 2 individuals who each kept it 50 days, then neither qualify. But that's fairly unlikely. But the key is 60 days, and the last 100 days it's like it allows a bit of flex in terms of moving animals through the ring to the abattoir. And we've looked at various options around that one. For example, you might have an animal going through the ring on a Friday, it doesn't appear in the abattoir until the following Tuesday, Wednesday, or something like that. So allowing a few days. But we found that probably the best reaction is at 60 days in the last 100. It's a little bit of flex in that system. Now, the important thing here is,
see just on the way, see if mom,
yeah.
see if all keeps in there, said so told he himself and the finisher, he has to in for 60 days, he can stop them.
Yeah, so yeah, if the finisher was keeping it more than 60 days, yeah. But what he would do is reflect back in market price. So if you think back to the slaughter premium, for example, so if you're a finisher, you go back and you're buying store cattle, and it's effectively going to be reflected in the ring. The fact that animal is going to attract a payment of 75 pounds, assuming it's going to be slaughtered under the date, under the age, therefore it's reflected in its value. So if you're selling a pre-pure store that's unlikely it's going to meet the slaughter weight, then that'll be the slaughter age, that will be reflected in its value. So you're starting to feed that information back down through the production chain. So basically the message is, we want well-grown stores that are actually going to finish within the time that we want.
I'll just take one off the screen here. Can I keep sharing them right in case the people on the screen think that I'm never coming back to them? But under the ruminant genetic program, will there be any funding available for the purchase of a stock bull like the BQI scheme in the past?
No. So what we're doing is providing information.
And this one you'll probably find easy to answer as well. Will there be a financial package for older farmers to retire and hand the farm to the next generation?
No, we're not looking at an early retirement scheme.
I sort of thought I'd get those cleared up very quickly. Down to the floor again.
Lauren, thanks very much for your presentation. I was surprised to see that in the carbon reduction measures that agroforestry has been classified under the LULUCF category rather than agricultural measure.
Yeah.
Because agroforestry was designed as a sustainable grassland measure and was supported by the department as such, just as a way of introducing trees onto farms in a range of configurations, which it can in many cases result in increased production because of the extension of the grazing season and so on. The problem, I think, is in the name. Agroforestry was sort of a carryover of an EU classification that had to be used, because it's not a forestry sector. And I think it'll act as a disincentive to farmers to classify it in LULUCF, because that means that any of the carbon credits they would get for planting can't be offset against their other farming measures on an individual farm basis. So I would urge the department maybe to rethink that classification.
Yeah, I mean, it's where we want to get to with carbon calculators, that you actually start to capture all of that information for the individual farm. But when it comes to inventory, the inventory is very clear in terms of where things are classified. The important thing is we capture that information for Northern Ireland, because at the end of the day, Northern Ireland has one target: it's net zero by 2050, and that's going to be the sum of everything, both emissions and sequestration. So if we increase agroforestry, then it's reflected in actually achieving that target.
Okay. Norman, in your presentation, you mentioned mitigation for volatility.
Yeah.
Given that in the last 18 months, volatility in the industry has largely been energy prices, fertilizer prices, weather, war in Ukraine, how do you mitigate against those type of things and interest rates as well?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point I was making. You know, we live in a very uncertain world. So the farm sustainability payment is there just to provide that basic safety net, that underpinning safety net for individual farmers. How you use that is really down to individual farmers. Where we want to get to is that through improvements in productivity, efficiency, and building in risk into businesses, that there's less of a reliance and a need for that safety net over time. But that's the world we live in, and therefore, if you have a farm system that is operating right at the very boundary of what's technically possible, yes, it might make you a lot of money in a good year, but it can leave you very vulnerable in a bad year. So therefore, I think it's building that, the ability to withstand shock and be absolutely almost every year you're going to have shocks. So be it a price, be it a weather event, be a weather event in what part of the world. It's not just local. That's what the industry is exposed to.
Yeah, go ahead.
As net zero is a big driver tonight. I haven't heard the word renewables mentioned. I'm just wondering, is there something down the line with renewables coming from the department?
Yeah, well, one thing that we're quite interested in looking at is on AD, anaerobic digestion. It has a potential to address a number of issues. If we can actually find a model that works where we're not spreading digestate on land, and that's where we've actually had a project on the way, looking at six different projects, really start to explore the bolt-on bit at the end of AD in terms of how you actually use AD. Because if you get to a model where you can actually take slurry off farm or separate slurry or whatever, put it through an AD, extract nutrients and not have land spread, it can help on renewable energy production, absolutely. It means that it could start helping solve your phosphate problem, which is reflected in water quality. It could even contribute possibly towards methane mitigation, maybe have a role around ammonia as well. So all of those things are in play, and we're really interested in exploring that possibility. And I think that's something we really want to move forward on.
A couple of questions here on the screen, then just and I suppose this is reflected from what you said earlier about cattle going south for slaughter. But do cattle exported to GB qualify for the slaughter premium?
If they're going for immediate slaughter, yes.
Yeah, and I suppose well, I look forward to the answer to this one. But how quickly will the single farm payment be reduced, and will it stop completely?
I don't see it stopping completely within sort of any reasonable time horizon, unless we get a really, really bad deal in terms of the next funding period. We're not actually setting a restriction at this point in time in terms of how much money will move from the farm sustainability payment into primarily farming with nature. I mean, that's going to be the big demand area. So there's a certain amount will move into the hedge payments, maximum of 50 million. Thereafter, it will be driven by the rate of uptake on farming with nature and how popular that is with farmers. So I think for any individual farmer, if you sit and do nothing and don't engage in any of those other programs, over time you will see the value of the farm sustainability payment fall. That's a given. So therefore, I think we all need to look at what are the opportunities within the other elements of this program, where you can actually start then to think, well, I could maybe engage with farming with nature, for example, and actually get into that program and effectively get some of that money back. When will we get to the point where they might open up a debate around what's the appropriate balance between the amount going to farm sustainability and the amount going to farming with nature? I'm sure we'll get to that point, to that debate at some point. maybe towards the end of this decade. But it's not a debate we need to have right now. And we'll also have to judge it in terms of, well, what's the budget, overall budget position at that stage. So it's one of those things, we keep it under review. We're not going to set this policy and walk away. We want to keep it under constant review, see how it's working, see how it's progressing. Is it delivering? If it's not delivering, we go back and change it. So we will do something all the way through.
Yeah.
Hi, Norman. We've obviously got a really very productive grants-based system here in Northern Ireland, and yet we've got carbon benchmarking and now ruminant genetics programs. Are they based on equivalent systems, or where is the research based for that? Is it the south, or is it north, or is it wider than that?
Sorry, so in terms of the ruminant genetics program, so that will be going out to a competitive tender very, very soon. So don't want to prejudge that in any way. So that's out there. In terms of the carbon benchmarking, the important thing in this one is that we do this to a consistent standard. So many carbon benchmark calculators out there. So basically, we want to have one that's applied to all farms and to all enterprises on that farm. So consistency of approach. But also, you want a carbon calculator that the owner of that continues to invest in it and invest in the science underpinning the calculator. So over time, it gets better. It starts to capture. They're not going to be good at capturing sequestration, for example. We want to ensure that that happens, that there's that continual investment in the calculator, but have it consistently applied across all farmers and all enterprises. So even if it's off a bit, it doesn't really matter, because it's the trend that's important, not the absolute level per se. So you actually want to see a decreasing trend.
Yeah, I suppose you hear nightmare stories that our carbon system's based on an allotment system in America, which is not equivalent at all to a grass-based system. So it's not that then.
No, we'll make sure that it actually is relevant to us. So there's no point, as you say, getting a calculator that's completely not suited or not relevant to you.
I suppose maybe just to add to that, and there's one over here, Catherine, bring the mic to, but I mean, my two deputies, William Irvine and John, were across in London, met with Australian representatives there only about 2 weeks ago now. They're on this journey around, carbon surveys and sustainability and all of that. Obviously, Board B in the south, this is happening across the world, so it is. And the problem Liz Truss, she only got 47 days as Prime Minister, but before that she did a whole pile of harm, and she created trade deals, with countries that just opened the doors. And those Australian delegation, like they very much have their eye on the high end of the beef market in the UK, and they know, well, if we're going to supply that market, we're going to need to do these things. And I suppose that's the same pressure that exists on all of us to remain in the markets where we currently are, and hopefully achieve other markets if we have a good story to tell. And I believe we have, because when it comes to our beef and our dairy, the emissions compared with the global average for our beef per kilogram is less than half, and for our dairy per litre is less than half. And how many in this room of farmers knew that, much less the consumer? Sorry.
Thanks. Just back on the carbon sequestration we talked about there. I'm just wondering, in the terms of the carbon sequester, say in forestry or flatland peaks or whatever it's happening, is there an intentional business model of the department to trade those carbon units, to sell those tons of carbon? And if so, would that money be ring-fenced for agriculture?
Yeah, so there are carbon markets out there. It's not something that we are venturing into, and I think it's something that you do with caution, because the important thing about a carbon market to operate well is its credibility, its verification, its longevity, its additionality. I mean, are you actually paying for carbon that was going to be locked up anyway? So those are all big factors within the whole credibility of carbon markets, and there's some very dodgy ones out there, but it's reflected in the value associated with them. So it's not something that we're venturing into at this stage. And I think personally, I wonder what's the longevity of those markets, because they allow big business to buy their way out of a problem rather than change behavior. The whole point about carbon reductions, change your behavior, change what you're doing. So in some ways, carbon trading actually slows progress, my personal view. So
I do agree.
I mean, I don't know if anybody in the rooms follows social media, but there's a whole hoo-ha today about all those well-heeled people with their private jets and the amount of emissions they're creating. And I understand Taylor Swift, I'm sure we're all familiar with, has been buying carbon credits. But in effect, well, certainly the language we use around that is greenwashing, because they're not reducing what they're doing. They're just saying, well, we're going to buy a piece of land and plant trees on it or do something somewhere else. So that's a huge challenge.
We're looking at the graphs that you have there showing that we're the biggest polluter, 28% in 2021. You've also said that methane is the main contributor to that. Anybody can Google it now, and methane is a life cycle of 12 years. That's right. If we look at this in a 100-year life cycle, we're not a big polluter.
Yeah.
Carbon credits is actually a way for farmers money out of the thing. I know your personal opinion on it doesn't seem to be based on benefit to farmers. And your graph was well done to get at, that's to me, you're not looking towards or for the farmer here.
So I would say two things. So yes, there's a debate going on in terms of how you actually treat methane. And so I'm not going into the details, but they are very different.
Go ahead, Fred, on environment.
Yeah, so they are very different in terms of the picture that they get. And that's why I'm saying that let's not take actions and decisions now that we might regret in 5 years' time because the treatment of methane changes markedly. Now, I don't think the change in the treatment of methane will get us out of jail. We still have to do something. We still have to make progress.
Who is holding us to account on our methane production?
So it's really down to the international standards around the inventory and what's the agreed standard. So it's unlikely that will change how methane is treated until at least 2028.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's the GDM that set these rules, and that they have to come to an agreement for everybody as a collective to say that 12 years is the understanding for the life cycle of methane. It's just we haven't got somebody telling them that at the top level.
I would suggest plenty of people telling them, but they're just not listening. But sorry.
So it's always comes back to build up the science evidence base. A good strong science evidence base, then that's the basis on which you then move. But because of the cycle and all this, that's unlikely to happen before 2028. Okay, if it happens, great. But we can make progress.
Again, that goes back to you decide which carbon calculator you're going to use. We're on the wrong calculator at the moment. 2020 is too late for farmers. The figures you put up there to kill animals now at 26 months instead of 32.
Yeah.
That's a 10% reduction in methane alone.
Yeah. And
if we take a 100-year life cycle instead of looking at 2021, then farmers are way down the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's the facts.
Yeah, but methane is a very complicated one. Because if you change to the alternative method of calculation, you actually have a much larger short-term impact rather than the 100-year impact.
But anything produced from them other industries is lasting for centuries. It doesn't disappear.
Yeah, exactly.
People don't understand that as well. That we shouldn't be accepting a lot of these rules that we are going to be. This will put a lot of people off farming. And my personal opinion is this is to make us plant trees because there's too many things to try and keep up with.
Yeah.
Trying to drive people out of farming.
Well, we're not trying to drive people out of farming because if you look at what we're doing here, not only will it reduce your carbon footprint, it actually will drive productivity, efficiency in your business.
Yeah, if you look at value for money, the money being invested over the next 20 years in methane reduction is pointless, in my opinion. It's taken such a small amount of it.
Yeah. The thing with methane is, yes, it has a finite life. But actually, if you reduce the concentration of methane in the atmosphere, it actually has a cooling effect. It's probably unique, not in those terms. That's why there's such a focus on methane. unlike carbon, once carbon's out there, it's out there.
So we should concentrate on carbon.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, the cause ultimately of, global warming, is, us basically taking stuff out of the ground and burning it. That's the core cause. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have these conversations at all. So yeah, absolutely, accept that point. But, methane, the science is getting better. It's a more sophisticated, analysis of methane that we need, and that is coming forward.
I think the analysis point is, I think the carbon calculator that we select for ourselves, if we selected a factual one, we're already well below net zero as farmers. And the fact that,
Yeah. The fact that I don't think we'd say that now.
we are. If you take
Yeah.
if big business is trying to come in and get carbon credits off us, it's a bit contradictory to have carbon credits that we can give to big business, but then also say we're being polluter. It just doesn't make sense. We are already carbon neutral.
Yeah, well, I don't think we are under GWP.
That's what I'm saying. If the calculator is being used as carbon, that's the kind of
Even
something that's factual.
moved to GWP star, which is the alternative treatment of methane, we wouldn't be below net zero. We still have a journey to go on. But even there.
What calculator is like business using that can rent carbon credits off me to offset theirs?
Well, I think that's back to the point that raised here that a lot of these carbon markets, they're not regulated. And therefore you've got big, very serious questions around the credibility.
Or maybe we're regulated too much.
Well, any market to operate efficiently has to have a level of regulation, and that's the problem with carbon markets, they're not regulated. And therefore, that's why you have vast differences depending on which market you're operating in on the value of that ton of carbon. I've seen figures as low as 73 cents and as high as 83 euros a ton. And that's down to the credibility of the market.
Well, just as the head man of DAERA coming to us with a slide, I think there's a wee bit of information to educate the farmers on the actual factual information that you read through there on the methane life cycle.
I mean, I'll just make a comment on that. Those of us, and indeed our policy officer, in the Ulster Farmers Union, and it's very evident you have a fair knowledge of GWP versus GWP star and all of that. I'm not going to we could spend the rest of the night here talking about that, but fundamentally from the point of view of methane, those of us who went to school and studied the carbon cycle and all of that have an understanding of the fact that methane 10, 12 years or whatever is recycled. So that argument exists, but it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is I think 68 countries, 600 scientists. We still have to get them convinced, but that doesn't mean we won't keep making that argument. So there's a question here just I'm going to follow up on before I give the mic to you, Gary, because it's on the same subject, and it's this. Will the carbon calculator that is used here in Northern Ireland be consistent and comparable with other countries such as China, Australia, as we know that there are various ways to manipulate the data to get the figures that governments want to achieve? In addition, how do we ensure our carbon calculator is not over-engineered in comparison to other countries so that we end up doing far more to achieve the results than anywhere else?
Yeah, so the carbon calculator is at farm level. And that's what we'll be investing. So you each have a picture of your individual farm. The comparison, international comparison, is driven by the industry. And that's, as you say, it's IPPC set the standards around that. So it's not a case of we add up all the results from individual farmers to go with an organic figure. It's a different methodology for doing that. So that international comparison is on the IPPC basis of operating.
Yeah. Okay, last couple of questions. We're getting near to 10 o'clock, and we're not going to rush away if there's a question after that, but you've one here at the front, Gary.
I'd just like to add a few points to the previous figure there on the methane issue. Methane now, I agree with this certain element of his what he's putting forward there. The situation with methane at the moment in Northern Ireland, methane now has become a valuable fuel. And we're the only people in the whole industry. Any kind of industry that can produce methane. Methane now has been injected into the gas lines in Northern Ireland. There's companies out there looking. And the reason they're injecting it into the gas line is to decarbonise, to move away from carbon fossil fuels. And we're the controllers.
of methane here. We're the controllers of an energy. And what's wrong is we're not processing. If you count the volume, I'm sure Derek knows the volume of slurries from farms. You can bring up that figure very quickly. There's a mathematical calculation. I'd like to hear that calculation and the cubic meters of methane and the value put to that. You know, we as an industry needs to understand that the carbon market, the EU this week has increased the value of the carbon market. On the carbon market, they even said in their statement where with the increase in the carbon market, farmers will play a big part in this. Can you explain that why the EU has seen that? And as we are still part of the EU in legislation and laws, what part do we play in that? They're supporting this. Thank you.
So in terms of that calculation has been done by Queen's. I think they had a figure of 80% or something. In theory, of the natural gas requirement going down could be met if every ton of slurry was processed. Now, that's obviously you're never going to get to that point. But it comes back to the point I was making earlier on. We want to look at the opportunities around AD. The important thing of the easy bit on AD is producing methane. The difficult part is at the end of the process, you've got to digest it. And if that goes back on land, you've got a problem. Can we solve that problem? And that's the bit that we're particularly interested in. And I think if we can do that, crack that one, and make it economically viable, then I think we've got great opportunities around all this area. So the technology around just AD production is simple, but it's the digested issue that we need to crack, and that's what we're looking at actively at this point in time.
Okay, we'll maybe take a last question there.
I was going to say, in terms of the opportunities maybe for new entrants or for young farmers, it seems quite limited if the suckler, say the suckler numbers are even set. Does that mean that a young farmer going forward has to follow generations before? Will be limited to whatever they have done? You can't make any changes themselves or what way?
Yeah, so details around the sucker measure are still being worked out. But you raise an important point. You look at this at two levels. You look at it at the population level, but then you look at it at individual farm level. So you don't want to be in a situation of saying that you're locking the structure of Northern Ireland agriculture to what it is today. You have to allow structural adjustment. So that includes, some farmers getting bigger, some farmers stopping. So you have to allow that to happen. The first thing you do is actually say the structure we have today is the same structure we're going to have in 25 years' time. Because that will do a great service to the industry. So those issues actually have to be allowed to. So you have to layer the policy agenda over that so you actually don't stop that sort of structural adjustment. It's very important to do that.
I'll just make a point before maybe Chris Gill is going to say a vote of thanks, but I think folks I want to say thank you to Norman, because what we do need to recognise here is, and I spent a few weeks ago now, I spent 3 days in the Netherlands, and I can assure you that's an education to what's happening over there in terms of basically forcing 3,000 dairy farms out of production, 500,000 cows. And our department, and I suppose those are the conversations and obviously the position that we'll have had as a UFU, that we do not want to see those cuts in livestock numbers. We see the challenge that's currently happening in the south of Ireland. So this is a constant across many of the countries in Europe. And I suppose the transition over the next 5 years between 23 and 27, and I sometimes think that the outcome that we end up with, you may be sitting here tonight thinking, well, that's a very middling kind of a outcome or mediocre kind of a result. But the fundamental thing is you need to be comparing it with what we could have had, which was the recommendations of the Climate Change Committee to immediately cut livestock. And that was the expert advice that was coming. So I don't want to underestimate the challenge that all of these things will be to us. And ultimately, at the end of the day, whether we can deliver over the next 5 years on the targets that have been set. But Chris.
Norman, a few different opinions tonight, but a few challenges ahead. But as farmers we will come challenge before and will again, but just going to have a things one. I'd like to thank you for sharing information with us on the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Excellent. And thank you, folks, and indeed those who are online as well that I haven't got visibility of what they've been sending in their questions. Thank you for your attendance, folks. Stay safe.